Senator Rubio, thank you so much for joining us.
Thanks, Buck. I appreciate it.
So immigration has played a large role already in the campaign, and particularly for you. Just last week, DHS admitted, they thought it actually wasn't that bad, but they admitted there were 500,000 visa overstays in 2015 alone.
Right.
This seems to lend a lot of credence when people say that they think that the immigration system is broken. This would be a data point they could point to and say, that seems pretty broken to me. What would you do to fix something like that?
Well, first, it's important to remember that all this focus on the southern border is important, but now estimates are that as many as half the people in this country illegally are people that have overstayed visas. And some of them may have gone back after they overstayed, but we don't know because we don't have an entry-exit tracking system. The solution to this problem is what I've been calling for now for almost 5 years, and that is a biometric entry-exit tracking system. You get a visa, you enter the United States, we log you in. We know you are here, the clock is running. Whenever that visa expires, if you haven't logged out when you exit, we know that you're here illegally. That information is fed to law enforcement, but that information is fed to a mandatory e-verify system so that if someone hires you, they're doing so illegally and discourage them from doing that. This is the best way to solve that problem, and we need to do a better job on the front end of the visas as well in spotting people who we think are going to overstay visas. And there's all kind of tools available, analytics tools and so forth, that would help us predict better people who are likeliest to overstay.
Now that seems like robust interior enforcement on the visa issue. What about the southern border?
Well, the southern border needs to be physically more secure than it is now. Number one, we don't have enough Border Patrol agents. That's why for 3 years now I've been calling for an additional 20,000 new Border Patrol agents. I believe we need to complete the 700 miles of fencing and walls in key sectors of the border that experts tell us we need. We also need more technology in some of the sectors, cameras and sensors, because they help spot people that are crossing or have crossed and allow for quicker and more rapid apprehensions.
Now, your record coming into all of this, coming into this presidential race, is as a conservative, but there are a lot of people who have given you a fair amount of heat and criticism, specifically on the issue of immigration, because of your support of the Gang of Eight bill. Now you're talking about things that would seem to be very clear on immigration, very strong on immigration. It sounds like your policies have hardened quite a bit. What do you say to those voters out there who are saying, you know, I'm just not sure that this is for real? I'm not sure that he's really changed on
Well,
this.
here's what's interesting. There's a lot of things about that bill the Senate passed that are not going to happen when I'm president. But all these things I just talked about, an entry-exit tracking system, those things were in there. I forced those things to be in there. We required those things to be in there. They were added into a lot of fanfare. The Democrats really fought against it. So when it comes to the 700 miles of fencing, the additional border agents, the technology, the e-verify, the entry-exit tracking system, that was actually in that bill because one of the things we worked on doing. But we're not passing the Senate immigration bill when I'm president. That was the best we could do with Harry Reid in charge, and of course we wanted the House to make it even stronger and better. When I'm president, we're not going to have amnesty. There's going to be real consequences for violating our immigration laws, and that includes sanctuary cities losing their federal money, which has always been my policy, and also the idea that if you're a criminal alien, you should be immediately deported. I mean, there's no reason to even think about that part. So that should just happen immediately. And so these have always been my positions. And that when I'm president of the United States, it's not the Senate bill we're going to do. We're going to do it the way we want to do it. And that's why it's so important we win this election.
On national security, if I can move us to that, the Middle East is a place where the president has obviously gotten a lot of criticism. And I think it's fair to say that if you were to pull out a map and point at countries that have been in difficulty in recent years, there's not one you could say, well, the president's done a good job of settling things down there particularly. There's not one place where it seems that perhaps victory isn't the right word, but even improvement doesn't seem to be on the horizon. It's easy to criticize the president's policy on these issues because I think he's failed in so many places and in so many ways. But what would you do specifically differently in terms of a broad spectrum Mideast policy to try to turn around what feels like a rapid deterioration in an already very destabilized area?
Well, I think it begins with reaffirming and reinvigorating our alliances in that region with our true allies. That begins with Israel. Israel is the only pro-American, free enterprise democracy in the Middle East, and this president has broken away from them somewhat. You know, the White House and Hillary Clinton were believers in this idea that the reason why we had bad relations in the Islamic world is because we were too close to Israel. So we needed to create some separation. That's been disastrous. It hasn't improved relations with anyone, but it has undermined our relationship with Israel. So from my very first day in office, it'll be clear to the world that America is a strong ally of Israel. Second, I think we need to reinvigorate our Sunni Arab alliances, particularly Jordan, Egypt, and Saudi Arabia, our military alliances with them, because they're going to have to be the bulk force on the ground, along with other Sunni Arabs from Iraq and Syria, that take on ISIS on the ground, reject them ideologically, and defeat them militarily. And third, on my first day in office, I'm going to cancel the nuclear deal with Iran. It's a disastrous deal.
Now, there seems to be a bipartisan consensus that using Sunni Arab allies to try to defeat the Islamic State is the way forward. The problem, of course, is getting us there. The Obama administration will tout over 60 allies they say, in the fight against ISIS. As we know, only a handful of them are actually doing the fighting. How will it be different under Rubio administration? We're sort of hearing the same things about this from a lot of different candidates, including Democrat candidates, about how they'd handle ISIS. You'd handle ISIS differently in terms of a coalition, but would you put thousands of U.S. troops on the ground, tens of thousands of U.S. troops on the ground, or are you looking to do more of a as-you-go U.S. Special Forces and other elite elements?
Well, we will have to embed American troops, not tens of thousands, certainly not over 100,000, but special operators, and we'll let the military tacticians tell us this is how many we need in order to achieve this mission. Whatever they need is what they're going to get. We're not going to handcuff them. But let me back up for a second in fairness. For example, Jordan. Jordan wants to bomb ISIS. And every time, on numerous instances where they have asked a coalition, hey, we want to go in and conduct an airstrike against this ISIS caravan, they've been told they can't. By the coalition, which basically means U.S. commanders. They've been told you can't bomb them because we don't know who's driving those trucks. It might be civilians, and they're very frustrated by that. So I think if you talk to our allies in the region, they want to do more, but it won't happen without strong American leadership and with rules of engagement that allow us to win. That changes when I'm president.
As commander-in-chief, you would loosen the rules of engagement.
Absolutely.
That would mean greater damage to ISIS, but it would also mean you're taking a greater risk of casualties. But you're willing to do that because of the nature of the threat of the Islamic State?
Well, let me just say, we're not going to target civilians, but if ISIS is going to use civilians as human shields, the way Hezbollah does and other terrorist groups do, and there are civilian casualties, it'll be their fault. In the end, we want there to be zero civilian casualties, and we are going to do everything we can to avoid them. But we are going to militarily defeat ISIS. We're going to increase U.S. airstrikes, embed increased special operators, and invigorate and stand up a very strong Arab-Sunni army made up of these nations, plus Sunnis in Iraq and Syria, to confront these animals on the ground, reject them ideologically, and defeat them militarily.
Now, Vladimir Putin has more than just a foothold in Syria. As we know, he's pretty involved there now militarily, and he's kind of put a thumb in the eye of the United States now for quite some time, as well as his actions in eastern Ukraine. How would you handle Vladimir Putin going forward as commander-in-chief?
Well, he needs to know that the next president of the United States is not Barack Obama. It's someone who actually is going to follow through with our commitments in the region. Vladimir Putin is a calculated cost-benefit actor. He calculates the costs and the benefits, and under Barack Obama, he has decided that the benefits of these sorts of aggressions outweigh the costs. That calculation will change when I'm president, and it will change rapidly, and he will know it. First, we have to understand who we're dealing with. We are dealing with someone who behaves like a gangster. I mean, he poisoned someone. This was out the other day. He's ordered the bombing of an apartment building as a pretext to go after the Chechens. We saw what he's done in Ukraine, and we see what he's doing now in the Middle East. So he will understand that we are going to stand strong with our NATO allies. We are going to reinvigorate the NATO alliance, including positioning more American troops, a missile defense shield in Europe. We are also, by the way, going to conduct attacks and airstrikes in Syria. We're not going to ask for his permission. And if he wants to get in a confrontation in terms of impeding our Air Force's ability to function there, they're not going to win that confrontation. Vladimir Putin knows that, by the way. And but what we're not going to do is create a situation where he thinks that he can get away with things because we're afraid to confront him.
So if need be, you would respond to Russian aggression in Syria with force?
Oh, well, absolutely. I mean, if one of our aircraft is threatened, that's the rules of engagement. If our aircrafts are threatened, by anyone for that matter, they have a right to engage and defend themselves, and they will. And that'll be made abundantly clear to them. But, even now, they probably try to jam our satellites and our systems as well. There'll be repercussions for that. We will protect our men and women who are serving this country. We are not going to put them in a situation where they cannot defend themselves. But let me be very clear. Vladimir Putin will not test U.S. military strength frontally, because he knows, despite all of his bluster, that they don't have the capabilities we do, not in a conventional way.
It's unfortunate but true that if you're the next commander-in-chief, you're the next president of the United States, you will inherit an Iran deal that has already been signed by this president. And we've gotten a sense, I think, of how much the Iranian regime has changed in recent weeks with the swap of prisoners that's occurred. They seize Americans under completely false pretext. We have to give up prisoners who were actually convicted of crimes.
Right.
What would you do with this Iran deal that will be essentially laid in your lap if you were the next president?
No, it'll be canceled. The Iran deal is not even binding. It's not a legal agreement. It is basically the president deciding to waive sanctions as the law allows him to do. When I'm president, that waiver will be removed, and U.S. sanctions will be re-implemented. And it's not just because of their nuclear ambitions. It goes well beyond that. They are violating all sorts of deals now with their ballistic missile programs, with their sponsorship of terrorism. They're going to take a lot of the sanctions relief money, and they're going to deliver it to groups like Hezbollah, a mortal enemy of Israel, but also an enemy of the United States. They're propping up Assad as well with that money. Even John Kerry admitted that a few days ago. He said, yes, some of this money is going to go to terrorists. I mean, this is an outrage. So that deal will be canceled in my first day in office, and Iran's going to be given a very clear choice. If you want to have an economy, you're going to have to stop your ballistic missiles program, stop your state sponsorship of terrorism, and stop any efforts to have a nuclear capability.
Now, turning to politics for a second, there are a lot of pundits, as much as you may or may not think that they have a good track on this race, who seem to think that this has come down to three. You're one of the three. It's you, it's Ted Cruz, and it's Donald Trump. Now, people compare you and Cruz on a variety of issues. There's clearly differences in style. I want you to tell me what the differences are in substance on policy.
Well, first of all, I certainly have a better record on national security. You know, Ted a few years ago voted for a budget that bragged about how it cut defense spending. It was Rand Paul's budget. When I'm president of the United States, we're not cutting defense spending. We're going to increase it. We are going to rebuild the U.S. military. That's the first thing the government should do. I don't agree with Ted's VAT tax, which is a tax you find in many countries in Europe, which puts all the burden on businesses who will now have to pay a tax on both the money they make and on what they pay their employees. And Reagan hated the VAT tax. He called it a way of government blindfolding the people, because you don't realize you're paying this tax because the tax is being paid through lower wages. That's where the companies are going to get the money in order to pay this tax. So I don't agree with the VAT tax either. I think, he believes Edward Snowden was a public servant. I think Edward Snowden was a traitor who's put the lives of Americans in danger. And if I'm president and we get our hands on Edward Snowden, he will stand trial for treason.
This is probably a good place to transition into also the metadata program, which you support and Ted Cruz does not, correct? The continued collection of metadata for national security purposes. Why is it that you take that position? And do you have concerns about skipping over the Fourth Amendment and warrant processes for American citizens?
Well, first of all, I would tell you that unfortunately, commercial companies in America, supermarkets and chain stores have more information about our Americans than the governments ever will. Second, I would say to you that it is possible to defend the civil liberties of Americans and have a robust intelligence program. It is illegal. Now, it is illegal for a U.S. intelligence agency to access the information of a law-abiding American without a court order. And if someone's caught doing that, they should be fired and prosecuted for violating the law. I can tell you that a local police department can get a hold of your metadata. All they need is a subpoena. But an intelligence agency has to go through a privacy court and get a specific court order, and even there are only limited to seeing your phone bill. They don't know, what you said in the call or what your text messages contained. And not only do we need that program, because it is an important part of an overall puzzle of information, I think we need to increase our intelligence gathering capability, given the fact that today homegrown violent extremists are growing as a real threat, and these terrorists abroad have grown increasingly sophisticated in how they communicate with one another. We have lost over the last decade a significant amount of access to information that would prove valuable in preventing attacks and disrupting terrorist cells.
Would you support legislation that would mandate backdoors in commercially available encryption technology?
I don't think that would work. And the reason why that wouldn't work on encrypted data is, number one, there's already existing encrypted software, and that's going to still be there. Number two, we can't control what foreign companies design, so it's very easy for a foreign software designer to create encrypted communication devices that will allow people to escape it. So I don't think, as much as some people may want that, I just don't think that would work. I think a better approach is going to have to be, we're going to have to create a very strong collaboration with Silicon Valley to figure this out. They're going to have to understand that while we want to protect civil liberties, we also want to be safe. And we hope they'll partner with the U.S. government the way industry partnered with America during the Second World War to protect privacy, ensure that Americans are not vulnerable, not just to intelligence abuses, but transnational groups and criminal groups that want to steal your data, but also create a solution to this very serious problem about how do we get at information that today we do not have about what terrorists are planning.
One of the defining characteristics, at least of one of your opponents, has been the ability to channel the frustration of the American people so far. I don't even think we have to name them. I think we know exactly who we're talking about. Sure. That frustration is very real, and it's based in facts and figures. It's based in numbers and the realities of people's lives across the country. What at this stage of your campaign do you have to say to those people who feel like they're not getting a fair shake, that they're left out, that they're working part-time jobs, they should be working full-time jobs, that they feel like their interests are not being put ahead of those of people from the rest of the world who are coming here?
I would say to them that they're right, that is exactly what's happening, because their leaders in both political parties and in Washington have failed them. There's no doubt about it. I would also say to them that the good news is, if we do what needs to be done right now, not only will they be better off, our country can be greater than it's ever been. As tough as things may be today, We are a few important steps away from ushering in the greatest era in American history. There's so much opportunity in this new economy, but we have to do it now, in this election. We can't wait another 4 years, and that's why I'm running for president. I give the Republicans and conservatives the best chance to beat Hillary Clinton, undo the damage Barack Obama has done, and put in place the policies we need to turn this country around and help Americans not just be better off, but be better off than they've ever been. That's the real opportunity of the 21st century. We're going to make it a new American century if I'm president.
All right, Senator Rubio, thank you very much for the time. Appreciate it.
I appreciate it.